Hey Brooke, how you doing? All right. So I decided to go with my speakeasy poster. I'm so glad you did. I thought that had just such huge potential. So I was really glad to see that you made that decision. I was kind of hoping that you were going to go in that direction. So I'm glad you did. Okay, the style you speak of from the 20s, that is Art Deco, and it looks to me like you've captured that style quite nicely in your illustration. So that said, let's jump right over to the illustration. I've got this set up in the window here, and I think it's just a fantastic start. I really do. I think it's just gorgeous. The movement that you've created with the line work in the garment itself is really remarkable, and I think that is a nice contrast to the flatness created or established in the actual figure herself. So there's no gradations in the arm, no gradations. All the movement is created with solid tone, and I think that is really a neat technique. The only gradient you have right there is the eye, and I'm going to talk about that in 1 second. So as far as this goes, I just think it's just a fantastic start. So I do have a couple of comments and recommendations. I'm going to zoom in here. Good typography, by the way. Good job. This I think is a little too big for the space that you have allotted for it. So what I would do is I would reduce the new justice a little, and I just give it a little bit of breathing room around the margins, top, bottom, left, and right, just so it doesn't look like it's really forced and squished in there. A little bit of breathing room, and I think that's fantastic. Password required. I believe that is, yes, that's the same font, so that's cool. I would add some text here. I would add another something like this, maybe not with all of the embellishments, but some sort of rectangle, maybe right down here, that just says the word speakeasy centered right there. So we have the new Justice Speakeasy, because right now it's a little bit unclear exactly what's going on. Just adding the word speakeasy is going to make a lot of sense. It's going to make a lot of sense as to why there's no location on here, because as a nod to history, a speakeasy wouldn't advertise, basically, and a speakeasy, if advertised, they were illegal. So you wouldn't find the location of a speakeasy on a flyer for a speakeasy, if that makes sense. So I think that's fine. But I would like to see the word speakeasy, just so the viewer understands. And when I say the viewer, I'm talking about a potential portfolio reviewer and a potential hiring agent. So I think that would help to clarify the intent of the piece, just adding the word speakeasy. Really nice embellishments up here. Right here, this vertical rule, this vertical rule, I would remove them. And I think they're impeding on the clarity of the illustration itself. Another thing I would recommend removing is this triangle right here. The reason I say that is because since she's kind of shifted to the right a little bit, the peak of this triangle would be right here somewhere. So it's creating this uneven, this basically asymmetry here in an otherwise symmetrical piece. Do you see what I'm saying? So this has just kind of this uncomfortable visual tension simply because of the negative space associated with the way that she is, the way she's seen in relationship to these two rules radiating from behind her. Another little trick in Art Deco is Art Deco uses a lot of these radiating lines or rules. Typically, though, they're radiating from below. So instead of shooting down, they would be shooting up. And of course, that is to indicate some sort of a light source. So if we go over and we take a look at some examples of Art Deco pieces, that kind of radiating, that's very common. We see it here. We can see it here, 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 here. That famous Metropolis poster. Here, this is an example of a Polish Art Deco piece. So just gorgeous stuff here. But as you can see, the radiating always comes from below and kind of shoots up. So think about that right here. Okay, as far as the illustration itself, like I said, I think this line and this line kind of impede the clarity of the illustration itself. Also, I think this area right here is really complex. I'm wondering if we shouldn't maybe just end the illustration right on that outer frame and keep the bottom black. Think about that. As far as the illustrative technique itself goes, let me zoom in here. Just a couple of things I want to point out. I think the scale might be a little too big. And right now, the scale might be a little too big. Right here, I think that stroke area right there is a little bit too thick and pronounced. This little piece right here, that little triangle, it looks like a piece of fabric holding that strap to this to where it meets her arm. I'm going to zoom out, and I want you to see there's a little bit of ambiguity there. See what I'm saying? It almost looks like there's a triangle in her arm from the background. You see what I'm saying? So that's a kind of an ambiguous area. So I would work on that, maybe even remove that or try, yeah. So it doesn't look like there's just a triangle missing out of her arm here. I think the scale itself is a little bit too large. And try working with the scale of the scale, the size of the scale, and also think about your color palette. The reason I say that is because basically you've got a monochromatic palette here. So basically that means that you're using one parent hue. And that being said, I think that there's not a lot of contrast between the actual scale itself, especially on this side, and the background. So right now, this is getting lost in her outfit, and it's getting lost up here. So the scale is not really definable as an object that she's holding until you really get in there and start taking a closer look. But at this distance, we can see it's really obscured here by the outfit and the dress. And I think that points to the color palette. So you may work on the color palette or try to. Otherwise, if you're really, really loving this color palette, think about a way that you can present this scale so that it doesn't interfere, so that the rest of the figure doesn't interfere with the recognition of said scale. Okay, does that make sense? Oh, my only other comment is that this new Justice Speakeasy, the concept of the illustration itself is a little bit sarcastic. And I say that because as blind justice, but she's peeking. So I think that is something that I think there's some levity there. I really do. I think there's some levity. And I think that if we were somehow to create or recreate that levity, and I saw that levity in the sketch, but I'm not seeing it here. The reason I'm not seeing it here is this, is she's got a very serious, solemn look on her face, and she's not quite peeking out of the blindfold. So I would love to see you try to develop an eye there so we can just kind of see her eye. So it's obvious that she is definitely peeking. Not trying to peek, but she's peeking. Blind Justice is peeking. And I think that is the levity here. And I would also maybe even consider adding some sort of a smirk on her face. Because again, I think the piece is a little sarcastic, and I would like to reinforce that sarcasm right down to the expression on her face. Final recommendation, I think this hand is really, really large in relationship, the spatial relationship to the rest of the illustration. So this hand is obviously much larger than this hand. So think about that. Other than that, wow, this is just a fantastic start. I love it. I'm so glad you decided to move in this direction. So keep working. Questions, comments, concerns, or clarifications, please let me know. One thing you might even try is this, now that I look at it, is on the outer frame, this kind of geometric line work, maybe even try some sort of a metallic. Metals were used extensively in Art Deco. So maybe even trying to establish this kind of metallic effect for the illustration here. Now we know that's easy to do in Photoshop, but guess what? Just about everything you can do in Photoshop, you can do in Illustrator. Some techniques are so advanced, it's crazy what we can do in Photoshop and Illustrator these days with this latest version of Illustrator. So try, and it might entail jumping over to a tutorial and try to add some kind of a metallic effect to that kind of outer structure. I wouldn't add it to the type. Try it, see how it works, and see what you think. If you like it, leave it. But if not, try it. Let me know what you think. Okay, questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, any of the above, please let me know. And this is just a really fantastic start. So great job. Thank you very much.